Chapter 30. People believe what they want. As Dr. Goncharova had suspected, there was a malicious motivation behind her temporary promotion. Dr. Kharitonova knew the best way to get even with their most dangerous opponent. The anonymous denunciations of Dr. Kharitonova received by both district and regional health authorities mentioned that she included dead souls, people who didn't really work at the hospital, on the payroll. She had managed to cover her tracks in time, but this was not enough for her. She didn't know who'd sent the typed denunciations to the authorities, but she decided in any case to discredit the person she held responsible for stirring up all this commotion. Scarcely a month after Dr. Goncharova's appointment, an incident occurred that left Wilma shaken for a long time. Arriving at work one morning earlier than usual, she was amazed to bump into the housekeeper at her office door. The woman was half-dressed and looked as if she hadn't slept. She stepped back from the door and hurriedly began to button her overalls over her apparently naked body. Dr. Goncharova's sensitive nose caught a whiff of spirits. "What are you doing here at this unearthly hour?" Dr. Goncharova asked, astounded and unable to tear her eyes away from the housekeeper's shaking hands. "Well," the housekeeper at last managed to fasten her gaping overalls, "it's coming to the end of the month, and there's going to be an audit this quarter. I've been coming early in the morning to do the accounts." "You've been doing the accounts?" Dr. Goncharova thought she could see a shadowy figure disappearing down the dim corridor towards the men's ward. "Well, that's fine." She caught another whiff of spirits. "Let's see what the audit reveals." Alone in her office, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The sheet covering the couch in the corner didn't seem to be arranged in the same way as the day before, and it looked crumpled. Her glass wasn't standing beside the carafe as usual, but some way off to the side. She had the impression that the locked office had not been empty that night, not to mention other nights. Without quite knowing why, Dr. Goncharova took a key from her bag and went over to the heavy safe hidden behind the double chest of drawers beside the window. Gently, as if she herself was a thief afraid of setting off an alarm, she turned the key twice anti-clockwise. Even more gingerly and almost noiselessly, she opened the heavy door of the small upper compartment. This was where the personnel files for all the hospital staff were kept. Holding her breath, she examined the contents of the lower shelf. She broke out in a sweat. There were 3 files there belonging to people whom she didn't recognize, containing records detailing their appointment to the hospital, all with an official stamp and her forged signature. There were only 2 keys to the safe. She always carried one with her, and the other she kept in the locked middle drawer of her desk, just in case. Dr. Goncharova darted to the desk and pulled at the drawer handle, but it didn't open. She rummaged in her bag, found the tiny key, and opened the drawer. To her horror, the safe key wasn't there. She was so shocked that she couldn't get up from the desk for a few moments. She let her hands drop and leant back against the hard chair back. She stared at the yellowing newspaper that lined the empty drawer like someone condemned. She emptied the few other items contained inside the drawer onto her desk and looked through them 3 times. What if the auditors had discovered these employees? Wilma felt completely overwhelmed. She'd be disgraced. With an effort of will, she forced herself to stand up and lock the safe door again. Making up her mind what to do, she left the office. The head of the district health authority was disconcerted by Dr. Goncharova's appearance so soon. "Here's the safe key, and you can fire me." Wilma's face was covered with red blotches as she passed the key to the official. "I have no intention of going to court for hiring non-existent employees. Please, please." The official stroked the paunch under his well-made suit. "What employees? What's this key? Sit down and calm yourself." "There are files for employees whom I don't recognize in my safe," blurted Dr. Goncharova, perching on the edge of a chair. "And that's the safe key. The duplicate has disappeared from a locked drawer. We're just about to have an audit. Why should I answer for someone else's dirty tricks?" The head of the health authority wiped his neck with an unclean handkerchief. "I don't understand." He dialed a number on his massive telephone. "Come in to see me for a moment," he said abruptly into the speaker. They sat for a few minutes in silence. The door suddenly creaked open, and Dr. Karatinova strode into the room. Walking in front of Dr. Goncharova, she awkwardly opened her handbag and removed a hand mirror. Still more awkwardly, she deliberately let the second safe key drop from her coat sleeve onto the floor. "Dr. Karatinova?" Dr. Goncharova trembled inside as she addressed her. "You've dropped a key." "What do you mean?" Dr. Karatinova pretended to adjust her hair. "It's not my key. You probably dropped it yourself." She slipped the mirror back into her bag, which she then closed with a loud snap. "You've been looking for something you haven't even lost." She met the official's astounded gaze. "What's the matter? Have I said something out of place?" Dr. Karatinova slowly looked the official up and down. "Who are you looking at, you bold twerp? Haven't we drunk vodka together dozens of times?" she obviously wanted to say, but restrained herself. Instead, she crept around the large desk like a cat and stood behind him. With a fluid motion, she placed her hands on his shoulders. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" Her slack breasts almost touched the official's prematurely balding head. This vulgar display made Dr. Goncharova feel sick. Still not picking up the spare key from the floor, she stood up and, reddening, fled the room. She hadn't expected such behaviour, even from Dr. Karatinova. However, Dr. Karatinova had miscalculated on this occasion. The head of the district health authority didn't forgive her display of impudence, and she was quickly and quietly removed from her position. Dr. Goncharova took full control of the hospital. Despite her relative youth, she made an excellent head doctor. She persuaded the authorities to grant her resources within 1 or 2 months, and sometimes within weeks, that others had taken years to obtain. Major renovation work was at last undertaken. Dr. Goncharova not only had the existing building repaired, but managed to have some extra buildings added. Her X-ray department was moved to a thick-walled brick building beside the neighbouring fire station. For that alone, the hospital staff would have gladly erected a monument in her honour, to say nothing of the staff of the children's ward, which had been situated next door to the X-ray department and separated from it by a mere wooden partition. Radiation is much more dangerous for children than adults, and even adults should not have an X-ray more frequently than every 6 months. Dr. Goncharova had suffered since her childhood under the Soviet system, but was now working for it with all her heart and soul. Working to improve conditions in the hospital was a worthy endeavour, but it was still more important to improve treatment. In this respect, Dr. Goncharova tried to tackle outdated prejudices that had amassed in orthodox medicine over decades, supported by the unshakable convictions of Soviet and foreign authors. It was at this time, in 1965, that she first became acquainted with the Buteyko method. She'd heard of the boy wonder from Akademgorodok, but their paths had never crossed. At the end of April, she needed more advice about a patient who had both TB and bronchial asthma. Dr. Goncharova decided to take him to Buteyko's mysterious laboratory. When she arrived, a middle-aged woman suffering from a suffocating attack was being carried in on a stretcher. Her face was so contorted with convulsions that it was frightening to see. Dr. Goncharova stepped aside, feeling her legs go weak. Since her 3rd year at medical school, she hadn't been able to stand the sight of asthma patients writhing in the grip of an attack. Her reaction dated from her 2nd winter as a student. Her high-spirited group and their professor had approached a middle-aged woman lying on a trolley in the middle of a corridor. They could hear her laboured, irregular breathing, even without a stethoscope. But still the smiling professor asked the group to take turns to listen to the patient's chest. Naturally, each of the 12 students asked the patient to breathe deeply. Her wheezing grew steadily worse during these examinations, and the group had only taken a few steps away from her when she began to have a massive, suffocating attack. Despite the professor's efforts to stop the attack, she died in front of their eyes. Wilma never forgot this tragic episode. It was only much later, when she was working with Dr Buteyko, that she realized that the group had overbreathed the woman to death during their examination. However, before she learnt about the diseases of deep breathing, Dr Goncharova was convinced that asthma was incurable, and she was more afraid of the sight of an asthma attack than anything else in the world. Then, at Dr Buteyko's laboratory, she saw the doctor perform miracles. He managed to stop severe attacks in minutes without using any tablets or injections. Wilma couldn't believe her eyes when the patient whom she'd seen carried in on a stretcher fell on her knees and started kissing the embarrassed doctor's hands as he tried to raise her to her feet. This woman, who had been awarded the title of Hero Mother for having at least 10 children, would have prostrated herself at her benefactor's feet and touched her head to the floor, such was her gratitude. For 25 years she tried every type of medical treatment imaginable, even the most barbaric, such as bronchoscopy. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Wilma's amazement knew no bounds. When she returned to the laboratory the next day, the patient was already walking around unaided. She had been taught how to stop her attacks by herself, and had clearly learnt this lesson well. Buteyko examined Dr Goncharova's patient. He commented that the volitional elimination of deep breathing helped other disorders apart from asthma. The patient was strong, and the TB had not progressed too far. Dr Buteyko told Dr Goncharova about cases where he'd practically cured TB and showed her the notes in his records. It was as if Wilma had crossed the Rubicon. All the other authors that she had read seemed to disappear. The simple, modest head of the Laboratory of Functional Diagnostics became her idol. His discovery of the diseases of deep breathing contradicted everything that her professors had taught her in medical school. His ideas went against leading Soviet and foreign academics, but he was right. Of course, she wasn't instantly convinced, but the memory of the hero mother patient kneeling in gratitude deeply impressed her. She also understood that as Buteyko's theories were anathema to official medicine, taking his side was risky, even for an ordinary head doctor with an unblemished record. As an ethnic German, oppressed by the state until comparatively recently, it was doubly dangerous. People hadn't forgotten the post-war trials of the followers of Weizmann and Mendel, apostates loudly denounced as Nazi sympathizers. If difficulties should arise, how would she, a German former exile, be branded? She could easily stay quietly on the sidelines. She'd swallowed enough bitter pills in her lifetime. Dr Goncharova could have refused to get involved for other reasons, for example, out of a desire to wreak some kind of revenge on the people who'd sent her into exile. As a doctor, she understood that thousands of Soviet citizens were dying every year because they didn't have access to the Buteyko method. However, she had sufficient strength and courage not to confuse the entire Soviet nation with its ruling elite. She was ready to go to any lengths, and even to run the risk of damaging her own medical career. When she saw the health establishment's hatred for Buteyko, she mentally prepared herself for the worst. However, even the prospect of ending up behind barbed wire didn't deter her. She was resigned to the fact that the terrible year of 1937 would cast a shadow over the rest of her life. Besides, it wouldn't be so terrible to suffer at Buteyko's side. The hundreds of patients she would save using his method would more than compensate for any hardship. Dr Goncharova asked Dr Buteyko for a job in his laboratory. However, the straitened laboratory couldn't even afford to give her a miserable salary as a senior assistant, and she had to wait 18 months. When her staff found out that she intended to leave, they tried long and hard to talk her out of it. They all said that getting mixed up with Buteyko was a mistake, and that the laboratory would soon be closed. They also pointed out that life on 98 rubles a month would be very different than life on her current salary of 300 rubles. "What are you talking about? I'll be working with a unique combined complexator, which provides mathematical data on diseases such as we can't even imagine." Wilma defended her decision to her well-wishers. "You should go there yourself and have a look. Then maybe you'll change your tune." She organised a couple of lectures on the Buteyko method at the TB hospital. Remembering Buteyko's maxim that the method could be understood by spending 3 days in the laboratory, she drew up a timetable of 3-day visits for her staff and made sure they went. However, these visits by her co-workers didn't produce the desired effect. I used to think that when they got wind of my discovery, hundreds of local doctors would beat a path from Novosibirsk to Akademgorodok, Buteyko reflected bitterly. He often made similar observations to his Siberian supporters. Indeed, Doctor, Wilma was forced to agree. I sent almost all of our doctors to your laboratory, and I didn't begrudge any of them the time, but in the end, she shrugged her shoulders. They oohed and ahed, but none of them mastered the method. They'd say wonders never cease, and that was it. There seem to be 2 factors, replied the doctor after a moment's thought. The first unpleasant fact is that a prophet is never honoured in his own country. Miracles can happen somewhere out there, far, far away. He gestured towards the window. But not here, right in front of them. They think it's some kind of showy circus trick. He dropped his head despondently. The second factor is that in order to understand the method, you need to believe that some disorders are induced by deep breathing, and that is far from easy. Doctors have worked long and hard to teach us otherwise, and who am I to contradict the authorities? He glanced down at his own slight frame. I'm not an academician, nor a Nobel Prize winner. I just have a Ph.D. We can try to make people overcome this obstacle. It won't be easy. He was lost in thought for a moment. As good old Freud pointed out, it doesn't matter what the facts are. People believe what they want to. They are taught to believe the authorities on their pedestals, and, as Freud says, they don't care that these authorities could be full of hot air.